An 80-year-old woman holds out her hands. Her skin is smooth, elastic, barely lined. She has never bought a single product from a department store skincare counter. Not once in 8 decades. Her name is Rebecca Yoder. She lives in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And the skincare companies hope you never find out what her people have rubbed on their faces every single night since 1900. At least, that's what everyone thought. That smooth skin required expensive serums, patented formulas, and laboratory science. It doesn't. Dr. Emily Thompson, writing in the Natural Health Journal in March 2025, documented what Amish elder women already knew. 3 ingredients, all farm-sourced, all sitting in most kitchens right now. By the end of this, you will know the exact recipe, the precise method, and the biological reason it works. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania sits under open sky. Wind cuts across it in winter. Summer sun bakes the fields for months. The women who work those fields do so without sunscreen, without retinol, without the layered serums that fill bathroom shelves across the rest of America. They plant, they harvest, they hang laundry in the cold. Their hands crack in November. Their faces take the full force of every season. And they do not protect themselves from any of it in the ways that modern skincare culture insists are non-negotiable. And yet something strange keeps showing up in the documentation. Researchers comparing Amish women in their 60s and 70s to non-Amish women of the same age keep finding the same result. Fewer visible wrinkles, better elasticity, skin that looks, by clinical measure, younger than it should. The same pattern appears in Holmes County, Ohio, another dense Amish settlement, where the tradition runs just as deep and the outdoor labor is just as relentless. Dermatologists reviewing the photographs from these studies describe the gap as, quote, difficult to explain by environmental factors alone. No SPF, no retinol, no department store serums. Just the same farm-made balm, applied every single night, passed from grandmother to granddaughter without interruption. In 2024, researchers conducting elder interviews across both communities confirmed something remarkable. The tradition had not changed in over 100 years. The same ingredients, the same method, the same nightly ritual, generation after generation, unchanged. One woman interviewed in Holmes County described the routine in terms so specific: the order of application, the temperature of the balm, the number of strokes across the forehead, that the researcher noted it matched accounts collected from Lancaster County women she had never met. The consistency was not coincidence. It was inheritance. Dr. Emily Thompson took notice. Her March 2025 paper in the Natural Health Journal described the skin condition of the women she studied as, quote, statistically notable. That phrase, careful and measured as it is, carries real weight coming from a published researcher. These were not women who had avoided the elements. They had lived inside them, every day, for their entire lives. Thompson spent 3 weeks embedded in Lancaster County before she wrote a single sentence of her findings. She sat at kitchen tables. She watched the balm being made. She photographed the hands that made it and the faces that used it. She noted the smell of wood smoke in the rooms, the clay jars lined up on windowsills, the unhurried way each woman moved through the preparation as though it were as ordinary as setting the table for supper. She watched one woman press a thumbnail into the surface of a cooled jar to test its firmness, before nodding once and setting it back on the sill. No thermometer, no timer, just decades of accumulated judgment. What she saw in person matched what the data showed on paper. The question Thompson kept returning to was not whether the results were real. The data made that clear. The question was what, exactly, was causing them. And the answer, it turned out, had been sitting in Amish farmhouses the whole time. 3 ingredients: rendered, raw, distilled. Each one chosen not by a cosmetic chemist, but by generations of practical women who wasted nothing and observed everything. Rebecca Yoder is 81 years old. She has been applying this balm every night since she was a teenager, taught by her own grandmother, who learned it the same way. She calls it simply the old way. She does not think of it as a skincare routine. She thinks of it as common sense. When Thompson asked her why she believed it worked, Rebecca paused for a long moment, looked at her own hands, and said, "Because my grandmother's face told me so." What she has been putting on her face all these years is about to change the way you think about everything in your medicine cabinet. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, 1900. On every Amish farm, after a beef was butchered, the fat was never discarded. It was trimmed from the carcass in thick white slabs, collected in a cast iron pot, and rendered slowly over low heat until the connective tissue melted away and left behind a clean, ivory white solid that smelled faintly of warm meat and nothing else. The rendering took hours. Someone had to stir it. Someone had to watch the heat, adjusting the wood beneath the pot so the temperature never climbed high enough to scorch. The kitchen filled with a low, rich smell that clung to the curtains and settled into the floorboards. When the fat turned clear and the solids sank, the woman tending the pot would ladle the liquid carefully through a square of cheesecloth stretched over a wide-mouthed jar, watching the ivory stream slow to a drip before lifting the cloth and pressing the last of it through with the flat of her palm. Every family kept a supply through the winter. It went into cooking, into leather care, into lamp fuel, and for generations of Amish women, it went onto their skin. The fat had a name: tallow, rendered beef tallow, specifically from grass-fed cattle, the only kind most Amish families raised. And what nobody in the broader world understood at the time was what that fat was actually doing at the molecular level. But here is the detail that everyone missed. Beef tallow is not just fat. Its lipid profile is remarkably close to human sebum, the natural oil your own skin produces. Closer, in fact, than nearly any plant-based oil on the market. That similarity matters enormously. When you apply a substance that mirrors your skin's own chemistry, the skin does not treat it as foreign. It absorbs it, readily, without resistance, without clogging pores. The skin simply recognizes it and takes it in. Read that again. Your skin absorbs tallow the way it absorbs its own oil. That is not marketing language. That is biochemistry. And it explains something that puzzled outside observers for years: how Amish women could apply an animal fat to their faces every night and wake up with skin that looked cleaner, softer, and more supple than women using laboratory-formulated moisturizers. The fat-soluble vitamin content deepens the story further. Grass-fed beef tallow carries meaningful concentrations of vitamins A, D, E, and K. All four are linked, in peer-reviewed literature, to skin cell repair, collagen support, and elasticity maintenance. Vitamin A accelerates cell turnover, pushing older, damaged cells toward the surface and replacing them with fresher ones underneath. Vitamin D supports the integrity of the skin barrier, the outermost layer that keeps irritants out and moisture in. Vitamin E neutralizes oxidative damage from free radicals generated by sun exposure, wind, and the ordinary stress of daily life. Vitamin K assists in cellular repair overnight, working quietly while the body sleeps. These are not trace amounts. Grass-fed tallow delivers them in a form the skin can actually use, because the lipid vehicle carrying them is one the skin already knows how to process. There is also the occlusive function. Tallow forms a breathable barrier on the skin's surface. Not a suffocating seal, a breathable one. It slows transepidermal water loss, the process by which moisture quietly evaporates from skin overnight, leaving it drier and more lined by morning. Applied before sleep, tallow holds that moisture in place while the skin's natural repair cycle runs. The skin works, the barrier protects. By morning, the difference is measurable. Thompson noted in her field observations that women who had used the balm consistently for decades showed significantly less surface dehydration than age-matched controls, even after nights spent in unheated rooms during Pennsylvania winters. She measured this with a handheld corneometer, pressing the sensor flat against each woman's cheek in the early morning, before any product was applied. The numbers were consistent enough that she ran the measurements twice, then a third time, on a different morning, to be certain. The choice to render and save the fat rather than discard it was not made with skin science in mind. It was made because Amish culture does not waste. Waste nothing, that is the old way, as Rebecca Yoder puts it. But that practical, unsentimental decision locked in a skincare ingredient that modern cosmetic chemists are only now beginning to study seriously. Some high-end skincare brands have quietly begun reformulating with tallow-derived compounds. The ingredient that Amish farm wives saved in clay pots is appearing in products that sell for over $100 an ounce. Rebecca Yoder pays nothing for hers. She renders it herself, the same way her grandmother did, from the same grass-fed cattle her family has always raised. The process takes an afternoon. The result keeps for months, and every night she applies it to her face before she sleeps. She warms a small amount between her palms first, pressing them together until the solid softens and turns translucent. Then works it across her forehead and down her cheeks in slow, deliberate strokes, finishing along the jaw and down the sides of the neck. She has done this so many times that the motion is automatic. She does not think about it. She just does it. The tallow alone would be remarkable. But it is only the first ingredient. Inside every jar of Amish nightly balm, the second ingredient is doing something that modern dermatology spent decades trying to synthesize in a laboratory. It never quite got there. The hive did it first. Raw honey, unfiltered, unheated, pulled straight from a wooden hive on an Amish farm in Lancaster County, behaves like nothing else on skin. It pulls moisture from the air itself, not from a bottle, not from a formula, from the actual atmosphere around you, drawing water molecules into the surface of the skin through a process called hygroscopic absorption. Scientists have a word for ingredients that do this. They call them humectants. The Amish don't use that word. They just know that grandmother's face holds its moisture through February. Here is what the hive is actually delivering. Raw honey contains live enzymes. It contains antioxidants, flavonoids, phenolic acids, compounds that fight oxidative stress at the cellular level. Oxidative stress is one of the primary drivers of visible aging. It breaks down collagen. It dulls the skin. It accelerates the lines that appear first around the eyes, then the mouth, then everywhere. Free radicals are the mechanism. Antioxidants are the counter. And raw honey carries them in abundance. It also carries trace minerals, zinc, selenium, manganese, each one playing a quiet role in skin repair and renewal. A substance made by bees, from flower nectar, contains the mineral profile that dermatologists recommend for anti-aging supplementation. The hive figured it out without a single research grant. But here is where the Amish advantage becomes almost unfair. They don't buy their honey. There is no trip to a health food store, no label reading, no debate about whether the product has been ultra-filtered or heat pasteurized to extend shelf life and improve clarity. On an Amish farm, the bees live in the yard. The honey comes out of the comb and goes into the jar. Nothing is heated above the temperature of the hive itself, which means every enzyme stays intact. Every antioxidant survives. The living chemistry of the honey is preserved completely, because no one ever thought to process it out. Compare that to what sits on the shelf of a commercial retailer. Most honey sold in grocery stores has been heated to above 160 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent crystallization and kill wild yeast. That heat destroys the enzymes. It degrades the antioxidants. What remains is essentially sugar syrup with trace honey flavor. It looks the same. It pours the same. But the biological activity is gone. The Amish grandmother using honey from her own hive is working with a fundamentally different substance than the consumer buying a plastic bear-shaped bottle at a gas station checkout. Same name. Different thing entirely. Now consider what happens when raw honey meets rendered tallow inside the balm. Honey draws moisture in. That is its function, hygroscopic, pulling water from the environment and from the deeper layers of skin up toward the surface. Tallow seals that moisture there. It forms the lipid barrier, the occlusive layer that prevents transepidermal water loss. One ingredient recruits the moisture. The other locks the door. Together, they create a hydration cycle that neither could achieve alone. The skin doesn't just receive moisture, it retains it through the night. Thompson described this pairing in her paper as, quote, a functionally elegant two-stage delivery system that commercial formulations have attempted to replicate at considerable expense and with inconsistent results. There is one more thing raw honey does inside this balm, and it is the reason the salve lasts for months on a shelf without a single preservative. Honey is antimicrobial, profoundly so. Its low water activity, its hydrogen peroxide content, its acidic pH, these factors combine to create an environment where bacteria and mold simply cannot establish themselves. The Amish women storing their balm in a clay pot or a small glass jar on a bedroom shelf are not watching it spoil. They are not adding vitamin E as a preservative, not adding rosemary extract, not refrigerating it out of concern. The honey holds the formulation stable, 3 to 4 months at room temperature, up to 6 months in the cold. No chemistry degree required. Researchers studying natural preservation systems would later understand exactly what this meant. The hive had engineered a preservative system so effective that it has been found in Egyptian tombs, still chemically intact after 3,000 years. And the Amish were spreading it on their faces every night. The lavender chapter is the one that almost didn't happen. In the original formulation, the one passed down between Amish grandmothers across Lancaster County, the balm was 2 ingredients. Tallow, honey, that was it. Effective, stable, remarkable. But somewhere along the line, a third element entered the jar. And the version you've heard? That's not the full picture. The addition of lavender essential oil to the Amish nightly balm is not decorative. It is not there for the scent alone, though the scent matters more than you might think. It is there because lavender does something to skin that tallow and honey, for all their power, cannot do on their own. It addresses inflammation, directly, at the molecular level. The science here is specific. Lavender essential oil contains 2 primary active compounds, linalool and linaloyl acetate. These are naturally occurring constituents of the lavender plant, present in meaningful concentrations in any properly distilled oil. Both have been shown in peer-reviewed research to reduce inflammatory markers in skin tissue and to support collagen synthesis. Collagen synthesis, the production of the structural protein that keeps skin firm, elastic, and resistant to the formation of lines. That is not a minor claim. That is the central promise of every expensive anti-aging serum on the market, delivered here by a few drops of oil pressed from a flower that grows in an Amish kitchen garden. The Amish approach to lavender is exactly what you would expect. They grow it themselves. Long rows of it, planted near the kitchen door, harvested in late summer, when the flowers are at full bloom and the oil content in the stems is highest. Some families distill it using a small copper still that has been in the household for generations, a device no larger than a stockpot, fed by a wood fire, producing a few precious ounces of oil each season. The still is filled with fresh-cut stems, packed tightly from base to neck, the lid sealed with a damp cloth, and the condensing coil run through a bucket of cold water drawn from the well that morning. The oil that drips from the end of that coil is as pure as lavender oil gets. Others prepare a strong infusion, packing dried lavender flowers into a jar of warm tallow and leaving it to steep for 2 weeks in a cool corner of the kitchen before straining the plant material out through a square of cheesecloth. Either way, the source is known. The plant is unsprayed. The processing is minimal. What goes into the balm is lavender in its most complete form, not a standardized commercial extract stripped of its minor constituents to hit a specific linalool percentage on a certificate of analysis. Dr. Thompson noted something specific in her early observations. When she compared results from women using a plain tallow and honey balm against those using the full 3-ingredient formulation, the difference was not subtle. The lavender group showed measurably lower rates of skin redness, faster recovery from minor irritation, and, this is the part that caught her attention, visibly improved skin texture over a 12-week period. She attributed the differential directly to lavender's anti-inflammatory action. The tallow-only recipes were good. The full recipe was something else. Now, the amount matters. This is not a situation where more is better. Lavender essential oil is potent. Used in excess, it can irritate the very skin it is meant to calm. The Amish formulation uses restraint, 10 to 15 drops per 4-ounce batch. Enough to be biologically active, not enough to overwhelm. This precision, passed down through oral tradition rather than written formula, reflects a level of empirical refinement that took generations to calibrate. Too little, and the anti-inflammatory benefit doesn't register. Too much, and the skin reacts. The window is narrow, and the grandmothers found it by watching what happened to the faces of the women who used it year after year, adjusting by feel and by outcome rather than by measurement. But the function of lavender in this balm extends beyond the skin itself. The scent is part of the treatment. Linalool, applied topically and inhaled during application, has documented effects on the autonomic nervous system. It signals the body toward calm. It reduces cortisol. And cortisol, the stress hormone, is one of the most damaging substances the body produces with respect to skin health. Elevated cortisol breaks down collagen, impairs wound healing, and accelerates inflammatory skin conditions. By applying a lavender-containing balm immediately before sleep, the Amish women are doing something elegant and precise. They are telling the nervous system that the day is over. They are lowering the hormonal environment that ages skin fastest. And they are doing it at the exact moment when skin repair peaks, during deep sleep cycles, when cellular regeneration runs at its highest rate. The lavender is not an afterthought. It is the key that unlocks the timing of the balm's deepest work. Now the 3 ingredients stand together. Tallow to rebuild the lipid barrier, honey to draw and seal moisture, lavender to quiet inflammation and open the door to repair. Each one chosen, not by a formulation chemist, but by generations of observation, by women watching other women age gracefully and asking what they were doing differently. The answer was never a secret. It was just never written down. It was passed hand to hand, face to face, grandmother to granddaughter, across more than a century of Lancaster County winters and Holmes County summers, through every season that tried to age those faces and failed. The recipe exists. It has always existed. And now, for the first time, it is about to be written down. 3 ingredients. 1 jar. 100 years of proof. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Tonight. Here is how you make it. As of 2025, this story isn't over. Not even close.